Hello, and welcome to the JAGGAER 20.2 release feature demonstration for contracts. There are many features that have been added to the contract solution in the 20.2 release, including some overarching changes relating to contract activation, impacting all contracts customers, main contract document tag editing safeguards, more complex approval workflows for contract activation and amendment completion using the approval matrix, an enhanced amendment process which allows for amending contract information other than the price list and master contract document, the ability to copy RFQ awarded items into a new section of an existing contract's price list, as well as additional enhancements. Let's begin by talking about the contract activation changes. In the 20.2 release, two changes have been made to the contract activation process. First, the contract type cannot be changed after contract activation. This prevents potential conflicts related to changes to contract type requirements. Second, the contract cannot be activated until editing rights have been rescinded from the main contractor. This ensures that the main contractor cannot make unapproved changes to the contract after activation. So if you have fields available for main contractor editing, you must recall editability before you will be able to activate the contract. These changes will impact all customers and will become effective immediately upon the deployment of the 20.2 release. The next feature we will discuss is Master Contract Document Tag Editing Safeguards. Currently, the changes made when updating tags associated fields in settings or additional information areas of the contract may not be appropriately reflected in the MCD proposal if that proposal has already been approved. Now, to avoid these discrepancies, and more importantly, to prevent making changes that may affect an approved MCD, we will allow users to edit the fields associated with tags only when the MCD is in an editable status or prior to approval. In the case that the MCD is editable and a tag associated field is edited and saved, then the MCD will automatically update using the Refresh Tags feature. This will allow users to update tag information related to the MCD as needed without the risk of conflicts or having to manually refresh the tags in the master contract document. This is focused on fields managed locally in the contract, specifically contract tags in the settings area, and field tags in the additional information area. Be aware that depending on whether or not dynamic clauses are conditionally included in MCDs, editing a field in these areas may result in a clause being added to or removed from the initial MCD. More information about this feature: once the editing phase of the contract is complete and saved, the application will update the value of any fields used as tags in the MCD proposal, as long as it has not started the approval process yet, so the MCD must be in to be submitted status. The big thing to know is that these fields will become read-only once the MCD proposal starts the approval process, independent from the contract status or user right. This will safeguard the content in these tags from being changed after they have been submitted and/or approved. You'll see an icon by those fields that shows they are not editable. The only exception is that super users will always be able to edit the fields. This new process will be used when the MCD proposal is created from clauses that use tags related to the settings or additional information fields. It will not be used if the MCD is created from an uploaded file. Since there's no relationship between the fields and that uploaded file, the fields will remain editable at all times rather than becoming read-only. Now let's take a look at how this feature works. I'm logged into contracts and I'm currently in the clause library because I want to just point out where these tags are coming from in the master contract document that we're going to see on our contract. If I click into this NDA definitions clause, for example, and view the content, you can see that there are some tags in here that are going to populate with information from the contract. So let's see an example of that. I'm going to navigate to a contract that has a master contract document that uses this clause. This contract, called NDA 2020, has an approved master document proposal that was created from clauses. It's currently in to be signed status. Let's take a look at the document. Notice here that the NDA definitions clause I pointed out in the library is being used in this master contract document. And you can see here that because the information has been populated on the contract, our tags now reflect that. So our main contractor and our organization name appear here, and there is more information in this summary bulleted list right here. So you can see our contract value is $2,000, we have our start and end dates, we have our awarded supplier and awarded date, along with other information as well. So since this MCD proposal has been approved, we cannot edit the fields that are associated with the tags we just saw in the MCD. For example, on the additional information area, the award date, awarded supplier, and awarded to all have values that are populating as tags in the MCD. So you'll see this icon that indicates these are read-only fields at this point, and that's because the MCD has already been approved. Same for fields in the settings area. You'll notice that we cannot edit fields like the main contractor, the contract code, the title. Even if I click edit, because I do have rights to update this area, I still am unable to update these fields that are marked as read-only. The only exception to this would be super users. Now remember that if our MCD was created from an uploaded file, these fields would remain editable because there's no link within the system. But in our example today, we are using an MCD that was created from clauses. And not only that, but clauses that use tags pertaining to these fields here. So if we do need to edit these fields, what we have to do is create a new MCD proposal. So I'm going to go back to Contents Management and the Master Document area, and I will create a new proposal. Now our proposed master document is in to be submitted status. So if I go to the settings area, I do have the ability to edit these fields. We don't see that read-only icon. So I can simply click the edit button and make changes to any fields that I would like. Maybe we want to change the contract value or the end date. We can save those changes. And same with the additional information area. You'll notice that I can edit these fields as well. So maybe I want to change the awarded to lowest bidder. Once I save those changes, if I go back to my master document and view the document, we will see those changes reflected immediately. So you can see contract value was changed, my end date was changed, and my awarded to field was changed. We don't even have to click the manual refresh tags button. So this is going to prevent us from making changes in the contract unless we get approval on the MCD. So not only does this ensure for consistent information between the MCD and the field value, it also prevents changes from being made to an already approved MCD. That concludes the demonstration for this feature. The next feature we will review is the approval matrix for contract activation and amendment completion. Currently, in contracts, you can only configure the matrix approval for the MCD proposal approvals. Now, a similar matrix approval process can be used for contract activation and amendment completion if your organization is configured to use amendments. And this is separate from the master contract document approval matrix. It's not replacing it. So that matrix for MCD approval will still remain available. But you can configure rules and approvers in this new matrix that are different from the MCD approval matrix. This feature requires a new parameter value, so if you would like to enable it, please contact JAGGAER. Now let's take a look at how this feature works. I'm logged in as an administrator because I wanted to point out where to configure this matrix. So I navigated to Administration, Workflow Management, Matrix Configuration, and when you arrive here, you'll notice this new option for matrix configuration, and it says Contract Activation and Amendment. We still have our Contract MCD matrix configuration available, but we have this separate Contract Activation or Amendment matrix as well. Let's take a look at it. This is our current matrix configuration. Just like with our existing matrix functionality, we could do an approval simulation from here, or we can import an updated one. It's the same behavior as our other approval matrix configurations. Nothing new from this side other than that this is a new option to configure. So let's see how this all works with a contract approval. Now I'm logged in as a contract manager. And notice that on this contract, we see a Submit for Approval button rather than an Activate button. And that tells me that this contract is going to require some approval. So there's this new Activation Approval tab where we can see the current configuration. This tells me the criteria of the contract and who the approvers are. So Courtney Wilson or Sarah Smith need to approve this contract. Let's submit for approval. We will send our approval request. And now the contract is in activation approval status. Most of the areas of the contract are read-only at this point. I'm not able to edit anything. And if I go to activation approval, in addition to viewing the current configuration, which we saw before, I can also see the approval history and the last approval made. What I'm going to do now is log in as a different user and approve this contract. You might recall that Courtney Wilson was a required approval on this matrix configuration. So I'm logged in as Courtney now, viewing my approval requests, and I can see that Mega Global contract awaiting my approval. As the approver, I can take a look at the contract. I can see the information here. I can expand this to view the other configured approvers if need be. And depending on this approver's user rights, they may have the ability to navigate to the contract as well. In any case, once you're prepared with a response, we can select it here. In this case, we'll say that our contract will be approved and then confirm. Now let's log back in as our contract manager to see the results. So now I've logged back in as my original contract manager. You can see that the contract status is now active. And if we look at the Activation Approval tab, we can view the approval history, and we can see that the status is approved and that the last approval was performed by Courtney Wilson. Response date and time is listed here along with the response. And if she had included a comment or any attachments, those would be available from here as well. If you choose to create an amendment, it will show the approval configuration as well. This matrix configuration will be applied to both. We're going to talk more about the amendment process in the next section of this video. That concludes the demonstration on this feature. Now let's talk about the new amendment process enhancements. This feature applies to customers whose organization is configured to work with amendments. Currently, amendments can only be performed on the price list or main contract document in a contract. In the 20.2 release, amendments have been extended to the settings area and additional information area of the contract. This includes contract duration information, and the specific fields are end or delivery date type, start or signature date, end or delivery date, and automatic renewal for in months. It also applies to contract value information, specifically the total contract value and currency fields, along with the additional information on the contract. Be aware that there are no changes to user rights. Manage amendments is still the user right that allows a user to create, modify, complete, and cancel amendments, and edit active and published contracts still allows a user to edit the necessary fields, including those that are only editable in the amendment process. So if you are already using amendments, you don't have to do anything to take advantage of this enhancement. If you're not currently using amendments but you would like to, please contact JAGGAER. Now let's go into contracts and see how this feature works. I'm currently viewing an active contract. Once the contract is active, some of the fields in the settings area, along with the additional information area, cannot be edited, even if you have the user right and see this edit button. You'll notice that most of these fields are read-only. Of course, the exception to this is super users, who are always able to edit. You also might notice how several of the features in this release relate to each other. For example, my contract is using an approved MCD that has clauses with tags tied to these fields, and so they're indicated as read-only here. I'm going to cancel out of my changes, and now I'm going to click Create Amendment. First, I'll give my amendment a title. You can give it a description, add notes or attachments if you'd like, and then you can select which areas of the contract you want to amend. There will be 5 possible options here, depending on what is configured on the original contract. The price list and master document were available in previous releases, and now we also have the ability to amend contract duration information, contract value information, and additional information. For this demonstration, I will choose all 5 areas to amend, then click Create Amendment. This creates the amendment, and we're going to come back here in just a moment. But first, I want to go back to List to show you that we are on the Amendments tab of the contract, which has been moved. So this is a new area, Amendments. You might notice that the status of the contract is Open Amendment, and we can view the amendment here, but what I want to point out is the icons that are indicated here to show what is being amended. So we have amendment content. In my case, I selected all 5 areas, and there's an icon to represent each: the master document, the price list, contract value information, additional information area, and the contract duration information. So let's click back into this open amendment and take a look. By default, we land on the content subtab of the settings area, but if you want to view that overall settings information that we configured when we first created the amendment, you can select that here and even edit it if you'd like. Be aware though that you cannot edit the amendment content, so these options that are included in the amendment, once the amendment is created. Let's go to the content area, and this is where we can make our changes. Notice that this content information is in its own separate area on the amendment of the contract. So if we make changes here to something like contract duration or contract value, it's not going to override what we see on the settings or additional information area of the contract until we complete and approve the amendment, and only then will the new values be reflected in the contract. So the 5 areas of the contract that we selected to amend are broken into categories here. We have our contract duration fields, contract value, master document, price list, and additional information. Now again, remember that some of these 20.2 release features overlap with one another. So even if we edit the contract duration information, start and signature date and end delivery date are going to be marked as read-only because we already have an approved MCD proposal. If we want to change these dates, we need to create a new MCD proposal. So let me cancel that really quickly. And so the first thing I'm going to want to do is create a new proposal for my master contract document. So now we have a second master document proposal in to be submitted status. It's the amendment to the contract. There might be some changes I want to make in terms of clause management here, but for now I'm going to go back to the amendments area. We'll view our amendment. And because I have a to be submitted MCD proposal that has not been approved yet, I can now make changes to the contract duration field or any of the other fields that were previously read-only. So let's make some changes here. The specific contract duration fields that you can change are the end or delivery date type. If you say automatic renewal, you can also update the automatic renewal for in months field. Maybe we want to change the start and end date. We'll save those changes. Next, we'll edit the contract value. Maybe we want to change this. So we can specifically change the total contract value and the currency for value fields. Our master document, we created our new proposal. We might need to make some additional changes in the language of the document beyond just the tags that are going to refresh from our changes made to the fields above. Next, we can edit our price list. Maybe I'll create a new version of the price list. And I might need to make some changes to the prices that are in this list. Finally, I'll go back to the amendments area and make some changes to the additional information fields. And save those changes. So now I've made changes to all 5 of those possible areas of the amendment. The changes that are made here are not considered effective until the amendment is approved and the contract returns to active status. Now, if we were not amending our master document or price list, we would be able just to submit our amendment for approval right now. But because I created new MCD proposals and price list proposals, I need to make sure to get those approved before I can submit the rest of the amendment for approval. So I'm going to pause the video, get those approved, and then return to this screen. Now my master document second proposal has been approved, and my price list proposal has been approved. So because those 2 things are approved, we are ready to submit our amendment for approval. We can view the amendment approval current configuration here. Because we are using the approval matrix that I mentioned in our last demonstration, you can see here that either Courtney Wilson or Sarah Smith need to approve this amendment. So that's why instead of saying complete up here, we have a submit for approval button. If you're not using the approval matrix, then amendment completion is still possible via user write as it was in previous releases. So let's submit our amendment for approval. We will send the approval request. And now it's been sent. Just like we saw with the contract activation approval, most of the areas, including those in the amendment, become read-only during the amendment approval. Notice our contract is now in amendment approval status. So let's log in as one of those approvers and approve this amendment, just so you can see what it looks like from the approver side. Now I'm logged in as one of my approvers that have been configured on the contract activation and amendment completion approval matrix. Awaiting my approval in the approval request is the contract that we just submitted. The approver can see information about the amendment. It looks a little bit different from our last demonstration where it had contract information here. Instead, it says amendment. Some of the fields are different. And again, depending on the user rights of the approver, they might have the ability to go to the contract details or not. And here you can access an amendment report, which we will look at later, to find out more about the involved approvers and see what's been changed in the given amendment. Our approval response today will be approved, and we'll confirm that. And now let's log back in as our original user, the contract manager, to view the contract. Viewing the contract again, you can see it's now in active status. On the Amendments tab, we can see a list of any amendments. And that amendment to the contract we just created, the status is now completed. And there's some information about the users and the times involved with this amendment process. We can always create new amendments by clicking the Create Amendment button, and they will continue to list on this page here. And just keep in mind that the contract activation and amendment completion approval matrix can be used in this same process. Once the amendment is completed, if we take a look at it, not only can we see the last approval and the approval history under amendment approval, there's also in the settings area an amendment report that we can download and take a look at. And this will show the changes that we made all in one place. That concludes our demonstration on this feature. Next, let's discuss the ability to copy RFQ items to an existing contract. Currently, you can award items from an awarded or pre-awarded RFQ to a new contract. But in 20.2, there is an additional option when transforming an RFQ in contracts, allowing users to copy all or selected awarded items to an already existing contract. In order to be selected, the existing contract must be in the same project as the RFQ. The main contractor must be within the pre-awarded or awarded ones in the RFQ. And the price list proposal must be in not negotiated status. This is to ensure that, independently from the status of the contract and from the policies adopted by the customer, the price list can still be edited and the negotiation or approval phase has not yet been started. And of course, the user must have visibility on contracts for the appropriate selection and all rights needed to complete the required actions. Now let's go into contracts and take a look at how this feature works. I'm currently viewing an RFQ that is in final evaluation pre-awarded status. This RFQ has been pre-awarded to the supplier named Super Supplier. What we can do is go to Transforming Actions, and not only can we create a new contract from this RFQ, we also can award this to an existing contract. If we select that, it takes us to a page where we can choose a contract. The contracts that will be available for selection must be in the same project as the RFQ, the price list proposal status has to be not negotiated, and the main contractor has to be one of the awarded suppliers in the RFQ. I'm going to choose the facilities maintenance contract here. When I select, it allows me to choose what I want to transfer, the buyer attachments, the supplier response attachments, and the formula column values. In my case today, I'll transfer all of the information. Click Next, and this is the confirmation page. So this is just the items that are going to be transferred to the contract. Notice that you can deselect some items if you don't want that to be included on the contract. Then click Confirm. That takes us to the Links tab of the RFQ, where we can see that we now have one contract linked with this RFQ. Let's just view the contract. And under the Contents Management area and the prices, remember these prices are not negotiated, otherwise we would not have been able to select this contract. And now down below, we can see that we have this additional section in the price list area that includes the 2 items that I brought over from that RFQ. In the Links area of the contract, there are new subtabs for auctions and RFQs. These subtabs are replacing the existing Associated Objects section of a contract's details and settings page. So I just wanted to make sure to point out that new navigation there. So on this page, we can easily toggle back to that RFQ if we need to view it. I also want to point out that since we can link RFQs to existing contracts, there's no longer a 1-to-1 ratio limitation of RFQs to contracts like in previous releases. Let me show you an example of a contract that has been linked to multiple RFQs. This is a contract for facilities, and if we look at the links area, you'll see that we have more than one RFQ linked here. So now you can link multiple RFQs to the same contract. That concludes our demonstration on this feature. Finally, let's discuss some additional enhancements that have been made to the contract solution this release. Additional enhancements in the 20.2 release for contracts include the adoption of DocuSign Connect to enhance the electronic signature process. This will enable DocuSign's push capabilities, allowing for frequent updates to be performed without limitations. We've included quick view functionality to the email alerts that are sent to new and previous contract managers when the responsibility for a contract is moved. You can now update contracts that are a type marked as no longer selectable for mass contract management. There is also new helpful guidance for users configuring master document templates in order to improve usability. Historically, if you created clauses before your main document template, there were issues with overwriting default styles and formatting, and the styles of the template were not being applied to the clauses. So there are some changes that customers who have not yet created any clauses in the library will see. Now, if no master document template has been configured, the Create Clause link will not be available, and you'll see a message that informs you that you must create a template first. If you already have configured clauses in your clause library, this change will not impact you. There are also detailed information messages when changing the configuration of the master document template and some default formatting options for the template just to make it easier to use out of the box. Along the same lines, the price list now inherits the styles and formatting that is defined in the Word master document template. This will improve uniformity across all components of the contract. You may notice that it is now required to enter a comment when terminating a contract. This will ensure that all terminated contracts will have documented evidence that can be used for record-keeping and audit purposes. When exporting milestones, the export list will now include comments and information about who added the comment and when. And finally, there have been archival enhancements for all sourcing objects, not just contracts. These include an easy-to-identify icon next to an archived object in the Project Objects list on the Project's Details page, and also an audit trail which includes an entry in the history when an object is archived or restored. Please see the Sourcing Plus release video for more information. To learn more about the contract's release features, as well as the release features for all of the JAGGAER 1 solutions, please visit the Product Release Library to view additional training videos and to access the release notes. Now that you've learned about the new features available with the 20.2 release for contracts, start testing them in your organization. We hope this new functionality will empower procurement at your organization, and we welcome you to contact us with your questions and feedback. Thank you very much for watching.